Arrow, who just, made a great name. Okay, so when English documentary producer Simon Chin first asked around about making a film on high-wire legend Philippe Petit, friends who'd known or worked with Petit begged Chin to keep a distance, for Chin's own sake. Amazing story, but a difficult character, erratic, stressful, but this only upped the stakes for the dogged producer. Chin wanted him and would spend about as long pursuing Petit as it would take to make the splendid film that emerged from their encounters. His and director James Marsh's relentless wooing and nurturing of their wary subject birthed the critical and commercial darling Man on Wire. His quest began in April 2005 when Chin found himself professionally restless. He was feeling like, in his own words, a corporate gun for hire, working way too hard on a TV drama for a company in financial trouble and feeling a bit adrift. Ennui was setting in, he recalls. But then one Sunday morning, an idea came to him through the airwaves. He'd overslept and woke up listening on his clock radio to the BBC radio show Desert Island Discs, where a castaway and guests come on to talk about the music they'd bring with them to the desert island. That day, the castaway was Philippe Petit. His stories about his magic and stunt performances in the streets of Paris as a child, and the way he savored his artistic climb of tightrope walking across the Twin Towers at World Trade Center riveted Chin. I was totally and immediately struck by him and his stories, says Chin. By chance, he had lunch the following week with the producer of that show, and he asked her if she thought a documentary would be possible. The reply was blunt: don't go near him. He's a control freak. Appetite wedded. Then Chin went and bought Petit's autobiography, To Reach the Clouds, and his zeal to make the film grew even more. There was no suppressing his ardor. He was just an extraordinary man. So Chin reached out to Petit directly about making a film and got an answer that didn't surprise him at all. Join the queue. The non-answer didn't come from Petit, but from his chief gatekeeper and partner in all things, Kathy O'Donnell. Quote, Philippe doesn't use email, he doesn't have a mobile phone, nothing like that. Kathy protects him from the world so we can go be this creative force, explains Chin. She made it clear to Chin that there were several others who'd already inquired about making a film on Petit's life and work. But Chin stayed in touch with O'Donnell and found out that Petit would be coming to England to work on a stage adaptation of his memoir. O'Donnell invited Chin to meet Petit there in person, but that first meeting was a disaster. I wasn't prepared, I got stuck in traffic, and I was terribly late. I made the worst impression. I was so disappointed and angry with myself, Chin recalled ruefully. But instead of discouraging him, he says the awful encounter tripled my resolve. Blunted by an underwhelmed and skeptical Petit, Chin licked his wounds and turned back to wooing O'Donnell. I realized I really needed to impress her, he said, and as time wore on, he sensed that his campaign was slowly starting to bring him back into the duo's good graces. She started dropping welcome clues, hinting that other Petit film suitors might not be experienced enough. She urged Chin to write Petit a creative proposal for a collaboration in the form of a formal letter. So Chin lavished over the document, spelling out the exact nature of a partnership, a production schedule, and other details on his wish list. Finally, Petit called him. Chin was nervous. Petit told him that yes, he could shoot him, but not a film about his life, just to promote a tightrope walk he planned over the Grand Canyon. Chin was furious at Petit's agreeing to something so small but not to the quarry he was really after. Chin got irate with him, even though he knew anger could wreck his chances of making any sort of film about the Frenchman. It was a tactical risk, but Chin was at his wit's end. Would he admire me more for tenacity than diplomacy, he wondered? As it turned out, yes, he did. Petit seemed to admire Chin's passion and spunk. If it was a test, Chin might have passed, and his hopes were suddenly alive again. A summit with the two followed in Paris. The determined Chin prepped like crazy for the gathering, and made sure to turn up precisely on time. He even played a trick of his own. After finding out by chance that Petit was an obsessive color coder, Chin very carefully color-coded his research notes. During dinner, he nonchalantly started leafing through the notes, and Petit's eyes lit up. You're a color coder like me! And at that point, Chin says he just knew in his bones. I got him. He's mine. Petit handed Chin a coffee table edition of his book, inscribed with the words Chin had craved for months. Let's do it. So we have time if anybody wants to ask a couple of question or two, and then we can sign the books. Are there any questions from anybody out there? You guys are all like really close friends or relatives, so you've probably asked me these questions in the last couple of years. But if there's any that haven't been gathered up yet, go to town. anybody wanted to get that I didn't get? I wanted to get Charles Ferguson, who did The Inside Job, which won last year, 2 years ago. I didn't get him. A couple people I couldn't get access to. I really wanted to get the director of One Day in September, Kevin McDonald. Tried and tried, could not get through to him. But if I do another edition, I'll hopefully be able to get those guys now that it's out and they know that I'm not just some knucklehead in California who's been laying on the beach for too long and thinks he's writing a book. Yeah, John.
Do you have a favorite? Not to disparage the other one, do you have one you really love? Just a pure document.
You know, I tried really hard to make it not a Leonard Maltin, Cisco Libre kind of review. I write about all, even the films that I don't, some of the films that I really wasn't that crazy about, and I definitely will not name them. No, really, there were like one or two that I was like, yeah. And others, basically everything was amazing. And even those, though, I don't think you could tell that I wasn't as crazy about it. I tried really hard to write it from the point of view of how do they make these films, and not as, Jeff Swimmer thinks it's good, because who cares if I think it's good or not. I tried really hard not to make that, not a review. I wanted to be the opposite of review. And they were, some of them were more fun than others to write. Some of them some of them took 2 weeks and some of them took 3 days, and I don't really know why. But there wasn't a favorite. I mean, they're all amazing films, and Any other questions? Yeah, Michael.
Is there any characteristic that unified all the great documentarians?
That's a great question. In terms of their approach, in terms of the films, or
lifestyle, the way what kind of person?
Tenacious. They just believed in themselves. They believed in what they were doing. They, they saw every no as a maybe and every maybe as a yes. We have a few of them here. Actually, I want to introduce some of them. Greg Barker directed Sergio, which is a fantastic film. And it was in theaters and HBO, and a very dear friend of mine. And Tom Beers is here. Tom Beers actually blurbed the back of the book. And I'm so grateful for that. He's giving the world amazing work like Ice Road Truckers, The Deadliest Catch, on and on and on. His films. You've all seen them, whether you know it or not. You probably heard his voice too, because he narrates a lot of them. And he's a very dear friend, so we're really happy to have him here. And we had a few people here earlier. Frida Lee Mock was here. She had to go. And Mark Harris. They directed Maya Lin and Kindertransport, respectively. So thanks to them so much for coming. A lot of them live in New York or in London. So, another question? Yeah. Rob.
There's a lot of former students here tonight.
Yeah, I noticed
I've seen
that.
a lot of different sides of you. Won't go into detail. What we'd like to know is, now that you're an author, maybe with something like an autobiography titled 50 Shades of Jeff Swimmer.
The NC-17 version. I think my wife would have to write that, or at least answer that question. Thanks for asking. I'll let you know when that comes out. It might be on a blog. It might arrive in your door in a brown envelope.
Just like a newsletter or something.
Yeah,
I'll get on an email list.
Yeah. Are there any other questions? Yeah, Ben.
So if it's not 50 Shades of Jeff Swimmer, what's next?
What's next? I would like to do a sequel to this, actually. I'd like to add maybe half a dozen chapters, and I want to get photos of the filmmakers this time, and I want to get some more art to it and expand it a little bit. Mel Metcalf is also here. He and I just directed a film about Hugo Hauser. Bobby worked on it as well as an assistant editor. And I'd like to do a sequel to that. I think that would be fun. And continue teaching. Mel and I go to Cuba on Saturday, so that's kind of got me on my mind right now. We're going to take a group of 13 students to film in new countries. It's our newest best friend as of a month ago, and Gail is going to join me, and my sister and brother-in-law Paul are going to come too. So that's immediate. After that, I'm sure I'll do more films, more books. I love writing books. It's very hard, but it's a lot of fun.
Which is harder, books or
I kind of think of them as the same thing, to be honest with you. I think they're kind of the same thing. It's just a different way of expressing similar ideas. You know, I structure them in a similar way. I tend to write in my head and then commit it to paper pretty quickly.
Color coded?
But write to a lot of times, oh, I will remember the color code. I never need a favor from fatigue. I think books and films, to me at least, are kind of the same thing.
Are you aware that one
Thank you for reminding me, Greg. Yeah, I do know that. No, I just think of them. I'm not trying to sound pretentious at all. I just think, in terms of the approach, how I think about it, what I want to get out of the characters, how I want to structure them, they're very similar kinds of things. I mean, this film we just did about Gil Hauser had very definite chapters, even though you didn't know it. Some of the signposts are not as obvious in a film. You're being guided on a journey kind of more invisibly than in a book, which is a little more heavy-handed in terms of structure and formula. But yeah, Josh.
Was there any production that didn't have a crisis?
It didn't have a crisis?
Yeah, and if so, which of the films would serve?
20 Feet from Stardom was really crisis-free. Relative, that was probably of all 13 films. I don't know if you, hopefully a lot of you guys saw that because it was just, I think, 2 years ago. Yeah. Terrific film. It's a very buoyant, very upbeat film. It's structured pretty conventionally structured. And he had been a music video producer for many, many years. He had tons of contacts. He connected with Gil Friesen, who founded A&M Records. And Gil Friesen had the best Rolodex in the music world. Got him, everybody came to his door. He got Sting and Bruce Springsteen. Everybody was ready to talk to him. The ugliest part of music films, as the filmmakers will tell you, is dealing with rights. It's a horrible mess. But Gil Friesen, his patron for the film, who financed it actually, was really instrumental in getting him music rights. So music rights. So Gail and I went to the film about John Coltrane, and we stayed up many, many nights, like just pulling our hair out, thinking about how we were going to get the music rights. And you'd have to deal with that. So that one was pretty problem-free. If you wanted to have like, if you wanted to make one of these films in like a fantasy film, rotisserie league, if it's your first, I need that one. Because like everybody was just coming to his door, and he had a lot of films stacked together in one. Some of the characters could have easily been in a whole film. Darlene Love, I don't know how you guys remember her, but she kind of eats up that movie in a lot of ways. She could easily be a really terrific feature film herself. So that one was good. I looked at him after the interview, was like, Morgan, man, this was a breeze. I thought, my book is about challenges. You really didn't have any. Pretty good. Made a lot of money, went on to do, a lot of other things. So that was a good one. Some of them were brutal. Josh Oppenheimer spent 7 years in Indonesia with serial killers, and to teach himself Indonesian to do it, and, just threw himself out there unbelievably. And actually, Josh Oppenheimer, who directed The Act of Killing, which was nominated last year, he won, right after the film came out, won a MacArthur Genius Grant. And he deserves it. Anson and I went to the screening, and we were blown away by how well spoken he is. The guy is just a crazy, smart, talented. But he threw himself into this film. That was probably the hardest, because he spent weeks and weeks with serial killers who were unrepentant, and we were very happy to show him how they committed them. So, so the book, like I said, I wanted it to be a real range.
They thought it was
from
Laurel and
like
Hardy.
conventional in studios to
That was what made it so creepy.
crazy. Yeah, John.
I watched the Schulhauser film,
Yeah.
and one of the things you pointed out that was quite so obvious to you is Huel would walk up to his subject and touch
Yeah, he was a
his
toucher.
shoulder.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, they were talking one-on-one to Huel and not to real. They completely forgot their own game.
Yeah.
And I'm curious if you saw similar techniques with your filmmakers.
Yeah, I think a lot of the filmmakers, that's a really good question, a lot of filmmakers spend a lot of time with their subjects before turning on the camera. That's a theme I definitely noticed. Instead of sort of getting at it, I'll see you at 10 o'clock at such and such address, getting out of the car with cameras blazing, they would leave the camera in the car and have lunch and have a meal over and over again, sometimes for days, before they turned the camera on. That created a lot of comfort. They knew the subject knew they weren't just getting hustled. It was someone who really cared about their story. So that made a key difference. But yeah, Huell Hauser was a toucher. There's no touchers like him. Tom, am I wrong? Are there any touchers like him? Tom's a separate story. Yeah, it was pretty amazing. Maybe he did some kind of like, jujitsu on there. I don't know what, but he just put them in the touch. It was amazing. Yeah, Brad.
Jeff, you and your students have made so many different types of documentaries, from climbing Kilimanjaro to NGOs in Africa. What's your kind of dream documentary if you had another 6 months sabbatical to do your own doc?
This is going to sound really nerdy, but I really would like to do a film about Chinese influence in Africa, because that's sort of a new, under the radar Cold War, really, between the West and China. There's over resources in Africa, which is the fastest growing part of the world. And I think doing a film about how that's influencing foreign policy and American and European economies would be fascinating. I'd love to do that film. I think it would be incredible. Not just because I want to go back to Africa. Obviously, I'll go back to Africa any day of the week. But that's an incredibly interesting subject, and I think it's not really well understood, the impact of it. I really want to know more about that. So, yes, I'm going to do a bake sale in your house. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for coming. I really Thanks, guys, for coming. Please have some